Hey everyone, welcome to the show. It's crazy, right? Like, we live in a world where buying a PlayStation could actually, save a soldier's life on the front line. I mean, that's the reality of war today, and it's
Yeah.
wild. It makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about conflict. We're diving deep into military history and current events today, so if you're into that kind of stuff, you're in the right place. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're new here. And, yeah, you won't want to miss this. We're going deep on the Russian-Ukrainian War 2023 by John S Harrel. It's a book, by the way. You can find a link in the description. It's this really intense look at how, technology and tactics and just people, all collided in this conflict that's, well, it's still going on.
Yeah, what really got me about the book was how 2023 is like this turning point. Drones just went mainstream, It wasn't just spying anymore. It was like everyday people were suddenly part of the war, using tech in ways we've never seen before.
It's kind of scary, right? The book makes this point that you don't need huge armies to fight a war anymore. One person with a drone could be a serious threat. Makes you think, what's the future of war going to look like?
Absolutely. And there's the story in the book about a Ukrainian unit. They had these like hobby drones, the kind you can buy online, and they used those to stop a tank attack. Think about that. Your donation could literally mean life or death on the battlefield.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it really changes how we think about who has power in a war. And the book goes deep on that, like how crowdfunding became this massive thing for the Ukrainian army.
Totally. And it wasn't just money either. People were sharing tactics, analyzing satellite photos, even helping program the drones. It was like a global effort, all connected by tech and I guess this shared feeling that they had to do something.
So the book talks a lot about this place called the Suwalki Gap. It's this narrow strip of land that connects the Baltic states to Poland and NATO. The book's argument is if Russia took control of that, it would basically cut off those countries. And that could, trigger a much bigger conflict.
Yeah, the Sawaki Gap is this constant tension point. The book really captures that, like how delicate the balance of power is there. One wrong move could have huge consequences. It's like a high-stakes game of chess, but with way higher stakes, obviously.
The book doesn't shy away from the brutality of war either, especially in the battle for Bakhmut. The author really paints this picture of just nonstop fighting and the terrible human cost.
Yeah, Bakhmut was a meat grinder. The book lays it out there, no sugarcoating. There's a lot about the Wagner Group, this private army with like brutal tactics. They'd send waves of poorly trained soldiers, basically cannon fodder, to wear down the Ukrainians.
Ugh, that's horrifying. Makes you wonder about the ethics of using these private armies in war.
For sure. And then you have Elon Musk and Starlink, like that adds another whole layer. The book shows how Ukraine become totally reliant on Starlink for communication and intel, which basically gave Musk a ton of influence.
Right. There's this one part where Musk suddenly limits Ukraine's access to Starlink to stop them from attacking the Russian Black Sea Fleet with drones. Imagine trying to explain that 10 years ago, this guy who makes electric cars can control an entire army's internet. People would think it's a movie plot.
It's the perfect example of how individuals can have crazy power in modern war. Like, the old rules just don't apply anymore, and the book makes you think about what that means.
The book talks about the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the summer of 23, this big push to take back land they'd lost. But it didn't really work out, did it?
Not really. The Russians had dug in deep, built all these defenses, minefields, you name it. The book describes it as just a slog, tons of casualties on both sides.
It sounds rough. The book goes into the challenges the Ukrainians faced, like getting through those minefields, coordinating attacks without much air support, and dealing with constant counterattacks.
Yeah, and not having the right weapons was a big problem. They needed modern fighter jets and long-range missiles, but those were slow to arrive because everyone was worried about making the war escalate even more. The book argues that if Ukraine had gotten those weapons earlier, the counteroffensive might have actually succeeded.
So where does the book leave us? What's the situation with the war as we head into 2024? It's still going on, right?
It is, yeah. The book ends in early 2024, and the war is still very much up in the air. Both sides are exhausted, but neither wants to give up. And with technology changing so fast, who knows what new challenges are coming next?
It feels like this war has changed things forever. What did you find most striking about how it's reshaping warfare?
I think the biggest takeaway is that conventional warfare is still brutal, even in the 21st century. But at the same time, technology is changing the game. It gives smaller countries a chance to fight back against bigger ones in ways they never could before.
That idea of everyday people having a direct impact on war is a big theme in the book, whether it's through crowdfunding or, people like Elon Musk doing their own thing. It's kind of exciting, but also kind of terrifying.
Yeah, for sure. It's a new world we're living in, and we got to figure out how to deal with it.
We've covered a lot, from drones to the blurred lines between civilians and soldiers. But let's not forget about the human cost of all this.
Absolutely. Next time, we'll dive into the war crimes, the humanitarian crisis, and the long-term impact this war will have on Ukraine.
It's easy to get lost in the big picture stuff, like troop movements and strategies, but we can't forget about the people caught in the middle of all this.
Yeah, you're right. The book really brings that home, like it doesn't hold back on the human cost of this war. It talks about the millions of Ukrainians forced from their homes, becoming refugees, the strain on resources, the trauma, the uncertainty. Like, it's a crisis that's going to take years to even begin to address.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff to see these numbers, but each one represents a life, a family, a whole world turned upside down.
Exactly. And it gets even darker. The book goes into detail about war crimes committed by Russian forces. And we're not just talking about accidental damage here. It's like systematic brutality, shelling of civilian areas, executions, torture, sexual violence.
It's a tough reminder that war is still a human act, capable of unimaginable cruelty.
Yeah, for sure. One of the most disturbing things the book covers is the abduction of Ukrainian children. They were sent to Russia forcibly. The book frames it as a kind of cultural genocide, trying to erase Ukrainian identity. Imagine the trauma, the loss, the forced assimilation.
It's awful. And the impact goes way beyond the battlefield, right? The book talks about the economic fallout, the social upheaval, the political instability, the environmental damage, like toxic waste, contaminated water, destroyed buildings and roads. These are scars that could take generations to heal.
It's a lot to take in, that's for sure. But the book also shows this incredible resilience. Communities coming together, people helping each other, the indomitable human spirit refusing to give up.
Yeah, there's that story about the Ukrainian women who formed their own ambulance unit, risking their lives to get wounded soldiers and civilians out of the fighting. That's courage right there.
Absolutely. The book's full of stories like that. The Ukrainian people have shown such strength and determination, facing all this adversity, organizing resistance, providing aid, documenting the war crimes.
Yeah, they're not backing down. So thinking about the future, what are your thoughts on technology's role in conflicts based on what you read?
Well, the Russian-Ukrainian War has shown that technology is a double-edged sword. It's given smaller nations a way to fight back against much larger enemies, but it's also made war more unpredictable and possibly even more destructive.
Do you think this trend of individual action will continue? Like the crowdfunding, the citizen warriors, all that? Or was this conflict a unique situation?
It's hard to say, but I think things have changed for good. Technology has made it easier for people to get involved, and that's not always a bad thing. But it raises questions about accountability, ethics, the role of governments. Like, how do we manage conflict in a world where it's becoming more and more decentralized?
It's definitely something to think about. This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening, seeing how warfare is evolving and the impact it has on people's lives.
Absolutely, and it's important to remember this is just a snapshot. The war is still going on. The consequences will be felt for years to come.
So before we wrap up, I want to bring it back to what we can do. As individuals, how can we make sense of all this and work towards a more peaceful future?
That's the question we all have to wrestle with. Stay informed, challenge misinformation, support humanitarian aid organizations, engage in dialogue, promote understanding, advocate for peace. Even small actions can make a difference. Create ripples that spread outward, building a more compassionate and just world.
Powerful stuff. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Russian-Ukrainian war. What struck you the most? What questions are you still thinking about?
Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you on the next deep dive. We've really dug into how war is changing, and we've seen the human cost up close. But as we finish this deep dive into the Russian-Ukrainian War 2023, I keep coming back to this question. What does it all mean? Like, in the long run, what are the implications of this war? Not just for the region, but for how we think about conflict in general.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? The book doesn't give us easy answers, but it does offer some interesting perspectives. One thing that really stands out is how this war has basically shattered this idea of stability in Europe. Like, the old rules don't seem to apply anymore, and the possibility of things escalating is always there.
Yeah, the book talks about how this conflict has exposed weaknesses in the international system, like the U.S. struggling to deal with the crisis effectively. It's a wake-up call, I think, in a world where power is shifting and technology is changing so fast. Finding peaceful solutions is harder than ever.
For sure. Another point the book makes is that this war has sped up the move towards a multipolar world. We're seeing the U.S. lose some of its dominance and new power centers emerging, especially in Asia. The book's argument is that this shift will probably lead to more competition and instability, making future conflicts even more complex and difficult to predict.
It's a lot to process. The book also highlights the impact this war has had on the Ukrainian people. their resilience, their determination. It's clear this experience will shape their identity for generations to come.
Absolutely. The book talks about how the war has brought Ukrainians together, like a sense of unity and national pride. This spirit of resistance has surprised a lot of people. They've faced so much hardship, so much loss, but they haven't given up.
It's inspiring, for sure. This whole idea of individual action keeps coming back to me. The blurred lines between civilian and military roles. The book paints a picture of a future where everyday people might be called upon to defend their countries more directly.
Right, and that's something we have to think about as technology keeps advancing. The book argues that the old distinction between combatants and non-combatants is becoming less clear. With drones and cyber attacks, even people far away from the front lines can have a real impact on a war.
That's both powerful and a little scary, honestly. The book doesn't shy away from the ethical questions this raises. If individuals have more power in conflicts, what responsibilities come with that? How do we make sure people are held accountable when the lines are so blurred?
Yeah, those are tough questions. The questions that policymakers, ethicists, even everyday people will have to deal with. The Russian-Ukrainian War has forced us to face some uncomfortable truths about how conflict is changing, and the book does a great job of laying out those complexities.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. Understanding history is so important if we want to deal with the challenges of the future. And the Russian-Ukrainian War is a conflict that will keep shaping global politics and military strategy for years to come.
It definitely will. And while there's a lot to be worried about, the book also offers some hope. The resilience of the Ukrainian people, the global support, the efforts to hold war criminals accountable. These are all signs that humanity can endure, even thrive, in the face of terrible things.
That's a good note to end on. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this journey. We've covered a lot, but this is really just the beginning of a much bigger conversation.
Keep learning, engage with these issues, seek out different perspectives. Tell us what resonated with you, what questions you're still thinking about. Leave a comment below. Let's keep the conversation going.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.